Hello, you are welcome back to Unit 5, Section 2. Under this session, we will look at the types of neurons, in that the neurons in the body are not all the same, and because of that, they are different based on the structure and function that they perform. So in this session, we will describe the types of neurons in mammals and also end the session with some information on other cells that support the function of neurons. By the end of this session, you should be able to list the types of neurons based on their structure as well as based on their function, and also describe each type of neuron, and finally state how the types of neuron differ. Now let's have a look at classification of neurons. With regard to neurons, they are grouped based on the structure and their function. So based on structure, three main types of neurons are known, and these are unipolar, bipolar, and multipolar neurons. And they are grouped or categorized depending on the relative position and the number of cytoplasmic extensions. Unipolar neuron, also referred to as pseudo-unipolar, these neurons have only one process that extends from the cell body, and it is directly attached to the cell body. And this one process divides into two, whereby one part acts as an axon and the other part also function as a dendrite. They are normally found in the posterior root ganglia of the spinal nerves. Bipolar neurons, on the other hand, have one axon and one dendrite, and they are also mostly found in the retina of the eye, the inner ear, and the olfactory area. Multipolar neurons, as their name implies, refer to neurons that have several dendrites and one axon, and the axon is long and have few processes, and they are relatively uniform and narrow in diameter. The dendrites are generally relatively short and have numerous branches, and they taper from the point of attachment to the cell body to slender processes where they terminate. The brain and the spinal cord neurons are generally multipolar neurons. This particular figure indicates the three types of neuron based on their structure, and these are the bipolar, the unipolar, and multipolar neurons with the respective characteristics as described in the previous slides. Another way to classify neurons is by their function, and nerves or neurons form part of the body's communication system, and they do so by receiving external stimuli and mediate the necessary response. So based on their function, we could have sensory neurons, and these are neurons that carry messages from the sensory receptors to the central nervous system. We could also have motor neurons, and these motor neurons transmit impulses from the central nervous system to either muscles or glands. Then the third one is interneurons or association neurons, and these neurons do not form direct connections with sensory receptors or effector organs, but just with other neurons. So far, based on our discussion, we've looked at the nerve cells in detail, and the nerve cells is part or forms part of the nervous system. However, these nerve cells are not the only cells in the nervous system. They are supported by a large number of other cells known as supporting cells. Now let's have a look at these supporting cells. The supporting cells are important in ensuring that the neurons carry out their neural message. And there are many types of supporting cells in the nervous system. and their properties also differ from that of the central and the peripheral nervous system. The primary function or main function of the supporting cells is to transfer nutrients in the blood from the capillaries that surrounds the nervous system to the nerve cells. They also provide a structure which guides and directs the neural signal. And another function of supporting cells is that they serve by consuming damaged tissue in a process known as phagocytosis. And they do not only clean up these damaged cells, but they also ensure that they fill up the space that is left in order to maintain the structure of the system. And the central function of these supporting cells helps to carry out or provide fatty sheets called the myelin sheaths, as we described in session 1. For cells that are damaged but not beyond repair, supporting cells are able to ensure regrowth of such nerve cells, and they do so by secreting nerve growth factors. And these growth factors ensure the synthesis of a tube-like structure to guide the growth of these neuronal projections. The supporting cells in the peripheral nervous system provide the structural guides, and whilst the central nervous system do not. As a result, damaged peripheral nervous system neurons are more likely to regrow after damage than the central nervous system cells. Supporting cells, also referred to as neuroglia, we will look at some of these types of cells and their function. The first one is astrocytes, and the function of these cells is that they anchor neurons to blood vessels, and because of that, it helps in regulating the microenvironment of neurons and also the transport of nutrients and then waste to and from the neurons. And the second one is microglia, and they function, or these cells are phagocytic to defend against pathogen invasion, and they also monitor the condition of the neurons. The third type is epidermal cells, and these cells line the fluid-filled cavities of the brain and the spinal cord, and they play a role in production, transport, and circulation of cerebrospinal fluid. The next type or examples of supporting cells is the oligodendrocyte, and these cells produce the myelin sheath in the central nervous system, which insulates and protects axons, as well as providing for sortatory conduction. And for Schwann cells, which is also another example of supporting cells, they produce the myelin sheath in the peripheral nervous system. And the myelin sheath protects and insulates axons. They also maintain the microenvironment and also enable to regenerate and re-establish connection with receptors or effectors. And they also enable sortatory conduction, just like the oligodendrocytes. The satellite cells, which is also another example, these cells surround cell bodies of neurons and ganglia, and their function is to maintain the microenvironment and provide insulation for the ganglion cells. Under Section 2 of Unit 5, we've learned about the types of neurons based on their structure, and we studied about the multipolar, bipolar, and unipolar neurons. And we also look at the classification of neurons by their function and the role of the supporting cells.